A Merry Christmas to LSU Nation. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we love with the best bloggers, the best broadcasters and writers in the nation. That includes Lon Phillips Sullivan, of course, from LSU Odyssey. Hey, Lon, how you doing today?
Merry Christmas, Mark. We're doing fantastic. How about you, my man?
I'm doing well. Merry Christmas to you.
Hell
Good
yes.
to see you, and always great to have you on here.
Always great to be here, Mark. Thank you so much, my man.
Much to talk about here with the coaching staff. A number of old-timers moving on, whether they made the decision or not, starting with, I know it's been a few days, but would love to get your thoughts on Bo Pelini, a defensive coordinator after just one season in his second stint.
Yes, we broke this story that he was going to be ousted. It didn't come as a big surprise to some people, at least they claim, but I disagree with that. This was a huge surprise that he was ousted this quickly. The man still had another year on his contract. We are having to pay him $5.6 million in the buyout. There was, every chance that ousting Pelini quickly would, especially for this year, would lose some big-time recruits, some big-time commits. We'll get to that because we lost one of them due to this decision. Probably our biggest on defense. Bo Pelini, he was really good on the recruiting trail. Brought us in Greg Penn, brought us in Naquan Brown, Keanu Coate, a bunch of these different guys. And we saw him on the defensive field, on the defensive side of the ball this year with LSU. 9 out of 10 games were 500-plus yards allowed. 3 games of 600 yards allowed. 381 yards allowed to Bo Nix as he puts up 48 points on LSU is just embarrassing. I was one of the biggest supporters of the Bo Pelini hire, but it was time. He had to go. If he were to come back next year just so we can keep some recruits, some commits on the board, that is not LSU football. That is not how we do things. That is not LSU defense whatsoever. And I even wrote a story on LSUodyssey.com just the last few days. One of my favorite pieces I've ever written, one of the hardest ones to ever write, actually, as a Bo Pelini fan. But it was actually asking, has this tenure now ruined his past national championship tenure? Because I think it has. I think, when I've listened to people talk about Pelini's 07 defense, it's, that was Glenn Dorsey. That was Craig Stelz. That was this guy. Bo Pelini didn't have anything to do with that team. And, we allowed 50 points to Arkansas. We allowed 40-plus to this team. And I get it. Bo Pelini, though, he's an LSU hero, LSU legend. But this tenure, we have a few inclinations of what may have happened, why the disconnect was there. And it was all about the locker room, all about psychology, all about mental health. It was all about disconnect emotionally from Bo Pelini and the players. The players are young, they're energetic, they're brash. They may do some cocky things. They may make some mistakes. Pelini, he's more quiet, more reserved. But then he's got this intense, fiery side that comes out, and I don't think the timing of that was right. There's an episode where he's freaking out at B.J. Ojulari for Ojulari making his first mistake of the season, really. While I know damn well that B.J. Ojulari is sitting there wondering, how come Damone Clark has never been reamed once when he's made a billion mistakes? How come Cordell Flott hasn't been? But me, as the freshman, he's just going in dry on me. And I think some of that stuff was seen by the players, and the disinterest grew. They were not willing to give everything for Bo Pelini out there. Only until the final games of the season, when it came time for pride, when it came time for playing for 2021, playing for maybe some guys' NFL futures, things like that, that's when you saw the real LSU 2020 defense. And yes, still porous. 34 to 48 points allowed for Florida and Ole Miss. There's a lot of heart, a lot of intensity, a lot of integrity that I saw on that defensive line as well. And there's going to be some guys coming back as well for LSU. So on the defensive side, some seniors. So that's a fantastic get as well. But it was sad. Bo Pelini had to go. But you know what? When you see that type of defense you don't ever want to see that again. And so if Bo Pelini had to go to make sure that happened, that's what Orgeron had to do. He's a guy who really knows how to clean up mistakes and messes, even if he's the one making them. Orgeron, he knew this had to happen.
Yeah, so the defensive losses from 2019 were both significant in regards to volume and also the quality of the losses, obviously, onto the NFL. But considering if we took the LSU defensive personnel that lined up in 2020, and I know that there were injuries, certainly Derek Stingley would be the most notable one that people would recognize on a fairly consistent basis, and extrapolated and looked at that roster personnel, even in the two deep, and we look at it 5 years from now, there are going to be a ton of NFL players move on. And to take this defensive performance that you're outlining, and I'm looking up as we were speaking, looking up the aggregate numbers, to see them ranked around the likes of UNLV and Vanderbilt and Eastern Michigan, Texas State, North Texas, in the defensive rankings as the fourth worst defense in the country at 492 yards given up per game. I know that they played a full SEC schedule and didn't have the FCS in the group of 5 games to kind of pad the stats a little bit, but regardless.
Doesn't matter.
Sure.
They had that was absolutely embarrassing. 335 something yards allowed passing wise per game. Mark, we were almost giving up a first down every pass attempt. I think it's like 9.8. Like, everything you just said is like exactly why Bo Pelini had to go. This is a historically embarrassing, pathetic defense. And regardless of what happened, what was the reason that it went into getting so completely awry, it was the constant in everything was Bo Pelini. The 4-3. Did the 4-3 work? Who knows? Did Bo Pelini teach it right? Did he do this right? Did he do this wrong? Was the disconnect with the players? The constant was Bo Pelini, and it's really sad. I was a big supporter of Bo, but as many great players as he has on that defense and even on the bench, guys who we never even saw this season, Devontae Lee at linebacker, he was playing some games at wide receiver when Terrace Marshall opted out, things like that, Eric Gilbert, he moved over to wide receiver because they knew there was no chance that Bo was going to be playing him at linebacker. And we really sucked at linebacker this year. We really could have used Devontae Lee, even just to find out what he has. And we never saw him. And we might be lucky, in my opinion, if Devontae Lee does not transfer. Josh White, freshman, we really should have saw this guy out there. He's a jack of all trades, can do it all. Never even saw him outside the special teams unit. It's just, it was an unbelievably disgusting, surreal thing to experience as an LSU fan.
Got Lon Phillip Sullivan on the line from LSU Odyssey. Check out the banner right there, lsuodyssey.com. Head on over there. Check out Lon's work. He is really involved heavily in regards to, he's got a number of sources, breaks stories, is on top of it, goes in depth on a number of these issues, regardless of whether he's certainly a big cheerleader for LSU, but certainly doesn't shy away from telling the truth and telling it like it is as well. So it's a great balance for the LSU fans to track Lon's work right there. Steve Ensminger, Bo Pelini, obviously, with a great first stint as defensive coordinator, and anytime you're tied to a national championship team, then you're going to have a certain place in LSU history. But Steve Ensminger played there, and now for the last 11 years has been an integral part of LSU's success. He leaves the program to a certain extent for different reasons.
Yep. It is probably time for him to step aside. It's not anything to do with his performance, but his father passed away a few months ago. This is a guy who spends pretty much every day and night sleeping in his office for the last 11 years that he's been at LSU. Even before that, with Auburn, when he was coaching guys like Jason Campbell, or at Georgia, where he was coaching Eric Zier. Another SEC record breaker right there. Ensminger has a fantastic record. He learned under Dick Vermeil with the Philadelphia Eagles. Vermeil let him stay in there for a few extra months, even after cutting him from the roster as a quarterback. Dick Vermeil saw something in Ensminger and was like, I need to help this guy. So he let him stick around in those meetings. And Ensminger, he took voracious notes, everything. He wrote down everything. And those notebooks stayed with him until a hurricane took him. But all of that knowledge then became up in here. We saw Ensminger absolutely destroy SEC and college football defenses, 4 number 1 defenses last year, for 40-plus points in some of these games, 50-plus in others, 60-plus as well. I mean, on the day he loses a member of his family, the wife, the fiance of his son, he goes out there and destroys, nuclearly eviscerates Oklahoma for 63 points. The man has intestinal fortitude unlike anyone. And he's a real man, because here's the thing. He knew it was time to step aside, but it was time really to be with his family more so. That's what this is about. And he's going to shift more to the analyst role, but this decision was up to Ensminger. I had multiple sources, and this isn't just from reading the headlines or anything like that. Multiple sources were telling me, including very, very close to the Ensminger family. Ensminger family knows exactly who I'm talking about. They were telling me this decision was up to Steve. This was not Coach Orgeron saying you're done, you're out of here. Coach O and Coach Ensminger are huge, close friends. This was a very delicate situation. It was about what needed to be right for LSU. Was this the time for Steve Ensminger to leave? Was this the time to get younger on offense? Was this the time to hand a certain assistant on staff the keys? That was up to Steve to decide. And I think that was a beautiful way to let that play out, because Steve, he did what was right for LSU, I believe. As much as I feel like an Ensminger Callaway offensive trident would be fantastic, I think Steve Ensminger's family need their dad. They need their father around. And I think it's great for some family time for the Ensminger family. I think Steve's been missing his family. I think it's time.
For those of you that aren't familiar with the story that Lon alluded to before, it's a heartbreaking story. If anyone remembers, just going back 1 year to the college football playoff semifinal against Oklahoma, just imagine arriving and being involved with the team. Steve Ensminger, the offensive coordinator of this team, preparing for that magnitude of a game, being, of course, heading to the site much earlier in the week and being involved in football activities, and learning that your son's fiance had traveled to the game earlier that day and had died in a plane crash. Oh my goodness.
It was so surreal.
Yeah. Crazy.
Wow. For him to go there and deliver that performance, I think LSU fans take that for granted. I think LSU fans, once Ensminger's gone, they're going to realize just who they lost. This is probably the most aggressive play caller in college football. The only mistake he made was trusting Scott Linehan too much this year.
So we got Lon Philip Sullivan on the line from LSU Odyssey. You see the banner right there. Check out his work, lsuodyssey.com, talking Bayou Bengals here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please like the videos. Even if you don't agree with me or Lon, it's still quality content. That's why we're here. Discussion, debate, analysis. Nothing wrong with that. But you can still like the great content. Of course, share the videos out there on social media. There are folks out there that have no idea that we're here or that Lon's delivering the work that he is at LSU Odyssey. So share the videos on social media, subscribe here, and hit that bell for the notifications. That way you know when we're going live. A third coaching component here in Bill Johnson, who arrived from several stops to coach the defensive line to a national championship last year. And his duties have been altered.
Yeah, Bill Johnson, he came in to help Meatball Dennis Johnson, who went out with 2 double knee surgeries last year in the summer before the 2019 season began. And Bill Johnson was he actually coached Coach Orgeron at Northwestern State in Louisiana. Bill Johnson, the defensive line coach for LSU, literally coached Coach Orgeron in the trenches at Northwestern State. I just love stories like that, ties like that. It's what makes college football the coolest sport in the world, I believe. But yeah, Bill Johnson, he's a football lifer. He really, really tight with Steve Ensminger. Those two are probably best friends. Bill Johnson, he's the creator of Aaron Donald's greatness for LA. He was on that staff that went to the Super Bowl, and he was also on he was also on the Saints 2009 defensive line staff. He was the defensive line coach for that Super Bowl winning team. Super Bowl losing team by the Rams with Aaron Donald as the defensive player of the year. That was Bill Johnson's final NFL role before he came and really saved LSU's defensive line in the summer. Orgeron needed somebody fast. He needed someone he could depend on in a bind. Meatball Johnson had to have these surgeries and was going to be serving more as an analyst off the field. And Bill came in and he did a hell of a job. He won a national title. And yet another ring on his finger. And that defensive line actually loved Bill Johnson. The sad thing is that I don't think Bill did a bad job this year. I don't think Bill was bad at all. This defensive line were ferocious. They were animalistically brilliant. The only thing I would say though is I think Bill Johnson has coached enough. I think he's coached his last game in college football. I think there's times I saw pictures, footage on the sideline where I didn't see the fire I saw last year from Bill Johnson. I didn't see the energy I saw, and it's a grind. It's a hellish grind to go through a football season, whether it be NFL, youth football, peewee football, or college football. It's a grind every time, every practice, every meeting. I just didn't see the fire anymore, and I think Coach Orgeron didn't either. And that's fine. There's nothing personal here. Anything I say is never aimed personally at anyone. Bill Johnson is a hell of a coach, and it's just time he becomes an analyst. And I think it's time that we give someone else, a very exciting someone else, a shot. And from what I've been told, news is kind of slowed with Christmas, but it will pick up immediately after because there's a lot of news going down and there's a lot of interviews being had.
And what you just outlined makes a whole lot of sense for a guy that has that kind of wealth of knowledge and experience from years of coaching and acquiring all that knowledge and experience to go to an analyst role where maybe the fire, the energy, all those things, and not talking about that he doesn't care anymore, but having just that ability to go through the grind of hitting the practice field, running around, showing technique, lining up to show this is where we want the hand placement and this is where we want, and doing all those things goes to a situation where he can just review tape and make suggestions and find things and work at a different pace that might be more in line with where he is at this point in his career.
Well, I know for 100% fact, Ryan Nielsen from the Saints defensive line, he's defensive line coach for the Saints. Unbelievable group this year, and as well as last, allowed their first 100-yard rushing game in I think it was 55-something games. Anyway, Ryan Nielsen has some Orgeron ties for sure. He has already interviewed once with the team. Derek Mason, who was just ousted from Vanderbilt, had really good 2 years there, even though that none of the numbers, none of the stats, none of the record is going to indicate that. But if you look at the fruits of his labors, Vanderbilt were actually really, really good team. They had a lot of character on that staff. And, he actually introduced the first female college football player ever. So there's got to be some credit given to Derek as well for that. But at his core, he's a defensive mastermind, Mark. And I think this guy, he's already been interviewed twice. He's been put through the ringer twice by Derek Panamsky or Coach Ed Orgeron. And I think Mason may be the guy for defensive coordinator. When I have a vibe about these types of things, usually they're right. It seems like everything's lining up for Derek Mason to get that job. Marcus Freeman was the one that I put forth first. A lot of people were following in that vein, but right now I'm hearing that he is going to be paid far too much by Cincinnati for LSU to match. We already just got out of paying a defensive coordinator who we didn't expect to pan out. It was very uncertain. We just threw $5.6 million at that guy. I don't think this group is going to be paying another defensive coordinator more than $2.5 million for a few years. That's just the direction we're heading in. We're heading in youth. And I think Marcus Freeman, you might have to cross him off right now. Or maybe just set him aside, because I think he's very interested in the LSU job. He's already interviewed. But I think that interview was a part of his process to kind of push Cincinnati to act. But Ryan Nielsen is a huge outsider for this job. I don't think he would come from the Saints D-line coach to be the D-line coach at LSU. That's not what we're going to see him do. Christian Locketor, graduate assistant last year, maybe he takes that D-line coach job. I could see him absolutely do that. I think he's ready for it. Absolutely 100% ready for that job. Benny Logan, LSU analyst, former great LSU defensive tackle, number 18 as well for LSU, played for the Philadelphia Eagles for a few years. He is another outside talk for that D-line position. Manny Michel, big-time LSU analyst, he could also get that D-line spot. He's already interviewed. But Ryan Nielsen is someone to watch for, because he's probably the defensive Joe Brady of the New Orleans Saints right now, and I think that's what LSU is wanting to move in the direction of. LSU wants youth, we want energy, we want innovation, we want someone who's going to be able to understand these players, not just on where I can plug and place them, but exactly how they tick, their profile athletically. We're not going to ask you to do something that it's just impossible for you to do. Like Bo Pelini, he was trying to get Damone Clark to cover. That's just something he cannot do, and he's going to be exposed in that ruthlessly. And by that token, it is unfair for you to put them in that position. That's one of the reasons Pelini had to go, is he just kept doing this and never adjusted. Ryan Nielsen is a great adjuster. I've seen it. The Eagles were running all over the Saints D-line. Just uncharacteristic mistakes at first. Jalen Hurts getting a lot of yards, stuff like that. But right after that, Nielsen just shut it down. And I want that type of adjustments on our team. That's the type of guy I want. We need energy. We need youth. We need passion. We need aggression. I want guys who literally they could be the same age as these players, at least in mentality. Someone my age. Someone 34, 35, 36. You want to go a bit higher than my age group, that's fine. I would hire someone. I'd have no problem hiring someone if I'm Orgeron, if they have the experience, if they have the credibility, and they have the merit. If they're 28, 29, 30, somewhere in my age area, I'm fine with that. But 35, 36, I think is probably about the perfect age group. But really, it's not about really age. It's not about philosophy. It's not about scheme. It's more about just these intangibles of energy, youth, innovation, and being able to understand these kids, really, because that's where Bo Pelini failed the biggest. On offense, though, replacing Steve Ensminger, there's only one man for this job. There's only one man for this job. As much as I'm being told that it's going to be a co-offensive coordinator role in the same vibe as Ensminger Brady, I don't see that. I just don't see that. There's all these, Phil Luongo, there's all these names out there. I don't see any of these names being the guy. There's only one man for this job, and his name is Russ Callaway. He's already on staff. He broke records at Samford. Unbelievable guy. He has the trust of the players. He has the love of the players on defense, too. He won 2 national championships as a defensive analyst for Alabama. So this is a guy who understands both sides of the ball innately. This is a guy who worked very well with each freshman quarterback, and I really think Russ Callaway, whether he shares the duties or is just the sole offensive coordinator, Russ Callaway has to get that job. I don't think it would be fair to just promote him up to passing game coordinator and then put some big name that we're unsure of above him. No, this is Russ Callaway's job. DC, I think it's Ryan Nielsen or it's Derek Mason. That's right now. Things could change.